Folks, I'm with my son, Asad Schuitema, who's the CEO of our business, and we are going to discuss a change in a program or an improvement in a piece of process that we've been working with on in the area of personal excellence. We do have a personal excellence program, which is in a sense our flagship program. It's a 5-day residential program. And we would like to do a personal excellence tour. I think we should do a personal excellence tour. So there's been some thoughts into what should be done there. And Asa and I will be discussing this matter in the course of this conversation.
No, good. Yeah. Uh, I have felt for a long time that personal excellence, it's like a diamond that people don't know about.
Hmm.
And it's a bit frustrating for me because it's hard to get people on the program because it is a 5-day residential program, in the Drakensberg. And but I've witnessed over the years the profound impact that this program has had. But it's also the kind of profound impact that's difficult to communicate to people, you know, kind of in a way that sounds authentic. So anyway, but one of the things also that we, is that it's one program and we never really had a follow-up to that program. So, I really welcome the idea that we can expand it. Uh, yeah. So what are your thoughts regarding the expansion?
So let me start off with uh, why I think it needs a second iteration, in the sense the inadequacy of what we have, because it is a very good program. I concur, and we get very good reviews on it. But I'm the only person who's been training this process, and I know where the sticking points are. One of the major sticking points is in introducing the 8 stations of attention on the fourth day, because it's an immensely dense and rich piece of content. And by the end of that day, people are just finished. So I've had a sense, and it's been for a number of years now, that content flies over the head of most participants, for no other reason than the fact it's just too much, at a time when they are already, in a sense, full. They can't take in anymore. So the, I've been concerned about taking the attention model out of the of the program, but then it's such a good piece of content that it needs a home. So that was my first consideration: is that finding a home for the attention model and actually building a second iteration of the Person Excellence program on on attention. Um, uh, can you hear me?
Yes, please carry on.
Okay.
Sorry.
I beg your pardon. So that was so the Person Excellence as it stands is going to focus on the issue of intention primarily. And the attention stuff will be working on the issue of skill. Person Excellence 2 will focus on the issue of attention. And if you like, the maturation model that we'll be working with will be the 8 stations of attention. So that's kind of the rationale for the difference. The framework that we intend to use, or that I intend to use to build this piece of process, is for people to kind of spend time considering different ways of experiencing and, in a sense, conceptualizing the relationship between the subject and the object. The first iteration we have of that is that is the self and the other.
Hmm.
Now, maybe you can help me think through this. I mean, if that's the binary we're speaking about, what are some of the kind of the binary opposites that would be consistent with that distinction?
Well, I mean, I suppose I have just a question regarding a step
mm,
back before progressing
mm,
forward with
mm,
that
mm,
one.
mm,
So I mean, there's actually two models of maturation, and the concern is, and the eight attentions is the more substantial model of maturation.
mm,
And it's I mean, and it comes at the end, and this is, it's like it's just too much for people at the end of a program.
mm,
um but for both models of maturation, I was just kind of contemplating what's the value that they have, and what kind of process can they facilitate, yeah, what's the value of understanding the models of maturation. Yeah, and if you can just speak through that a bit and kind of just think through that a bit, because that also informs process, I suppose, when we kind of
mm,
think about, there is this model. What does, how is this model actually helpful to us? And then
mm,
what kind of process does it facilitate?
mm, mm.
Does that,
No, no, sure. That's a useful kind of thing to consider. The, the, First of all, there's a significant difference between the attention and the intention models of maturation on the basis of complexity. The intention model is
mm,
it's simple because it's linear. It is based on the idea that maturation is from birth to death. It's a single line. Why that's the birth and death are significant is that they're the only truly unconditional moments that we face in our lives. At birth, we've had nothing yet. So whatever we're going to get, we will still get. And at death, we give or lose everything unconditionally. So we come getting it all, or owed it all, if
mm,
you like, and we leave. It's interesting, we leave giving it all, and our life is an incremental journey then between the two. So you have this idea of a simple binary kind of journey from birth to death.
progression.
You had to get, you had to
Mm,
give, and you have an idea of gray, sort of increments as from the one to the other, a change in the portion of the mix. Because a very clean narrative. And that clean narrative then allows you to cut into very almost arithmetically defined epochs. You know, fundamentally here to get. I'm here to get. Well, I'm still basically here to get, but I'm willing to give something. I give to get, which is up to adolescence. Then actually, I'm here. I really should be making a genuine contribution, but I still need to get something. Like an adult, I need to earn a living to pay for, feed the children. I get to give, and then when I'm getting ready to die and leave it all, I'm here to give unconditionally. So that's nice. It's clean. It gives you an incremental move, and it's straight. The problem with attention is that it's a little bit more complex. You cannot account for a mapping of attention on a pure binary sort of approach, because there's actually two
mm,
fundamental variables that are concerned with attention. Attention is really concerned with what you make significant. That's the one problem in the situation that you're in. So the first distinction that accounts for how our attention operates is that which is the attender and the attended to, the
mm.
subject, the object, the self, the
Object.
other.
Mm,
And
mhm,
we refer to this as the inward and the outward. And then there's a second variable, and that is what is made significant. But you cannot perceive anything without actually there being subtle discriminations going on an ongoing basis. I mean, you'll notice now you've just had a newborn son, and it's probably changing already I think that has changed already because I could see in the recent photographs. But that first photograph, I'm
Mm.
absolutely convinced if you ran your fingers across his line of sight, his eyes wouldn't track your fingers. So
Mm.
basically, it's saying that he's looking into soup. But as we grow, we start being able to distinguish forms, and those forms are saying that we're drawing little lines on the world. This thing stops
Mm.
here, and that creating of forms, that pulling things into relief so we can see them, and then by definition pushing other things into background, is at the same time make distinguishing between what is significant and what isn't significant. Without that thing going on, making things
Mm.
significant and making other things you cannot perceive. So there's actually two opposites that are almost like points of a compass. There's the distinction between the inward and the outward, the subject and the object, the attendee and the attended to, and then there's the distinction between what is significant and what isn't significant. Now, the, the they both, I think they're both accurate descriptions. And the question is, well, why should we make something that can be viewed simply complex? And the reason for this is that one's first understanding of the significance of basically the inward and inner work with regard to just defining your life experience. The easiest way to kind of track into that is through the lens of intention, because it's a
Mm.
simpler narrative. And you'll know how we do it. We say to people, what's the difference between immature and mature? And then we can relate it to that intent to give. And then we say, well, what do you want from your life? Security, fulfillment, power, and harmony. We can again relate that to the intent to give. So it gives you a very
Mm.
simple narrative to actually to engage this issue of the legitimacy of inner work. That I have to work
Mm.
on my intent if I want the best in my life, if I want to be secure, if I want to be
Mm.
fulfilled, and so on. And the problem is that the the idea of intention does not give you adequate toolage to understand the latter part of our maturation, particularly running up to our midlife crisis and beyond. And that is because it is very difficult to describe completely unconditional motive in the language of intent. Because unconditional motive has to mean a foregoing of outcomes. And the problem with the word intent is that it wants an outcome. That's how it works linguistically for us. What do you intend to do? You're already looking forward. You're looking at the future. That's how the
Mm.
so actually it's a very clumsy sort of framing to really get to grips with this distinction between being immature and mature. When working with the highest of myself and the possibility of acting completely unconditionally, completely with a disregard for outcomes, very difficult to do that in the language of intent. Um,
Mm.
Attention is a lot easier to articulate that because but the two variables that are being considered when you're looking at intention and attention. Intention is concerned with how we engage time. What do you intend to do? It's like attention is concerned with how we engage place or here, or not now, here. Now here, it's not difficult to forego outcomes when you're looking at here, because here it doesn't have an interest in it. It's not about outcomes. It's about, what am I making significant in the situation that I'm in? So it gives you a far more subtle set of tools to understand the latter part of your maturation.
Yeah.
When you forego outcomes, you stop having an interest in a result. Yeah. So that's why for the first round, if you're going to start finding the legitimacy or understanding that, in order to understand the legitimacy of inner work, it's useful to start with the narrative around attention. Beg your pardon, intention. For the latter part of your development, intention doesn't cut it. it's more useful to develop an articulacy around how your attention operates. It's a more sophisticated problem.
Mm. No, I mean, it makes, the beauty of the intention model of maturation, and I see it. It gives you a criterion,
Mm.
and the criterion is am I here to get, or am I here to give, or am I giving in this
Mm.
situation, or am I
Mm.
getting? And I mean, I've observed the application of this criterion in people deliberately and consciously.
Mm.
It's a easy criterion to apply,
Mm.
and it's a powerful criterion, and it shapes one's engagement on an ongoing basis, because you actually have this criterion on in the back of your mind. Hang on, what's my intent here? Am I being malevolent, or am I being benevolent? I mean, I would disagree with you slightly, just on there are limit. I mean, I can see there's limitations in the in intent, and because it's like a univariable, right? It's
Mm.
intention. Are you here to get or give, right? So there's but at the same, it does describe the latter ends in a certain way, and I like how you describe it, because for me it makes 100% sense when you say the intent. Being here to give unconditionally is like a cup a cup that overflows, like an
Yes,
overflowing
yes,
cup.
yes, 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 yes.
And it's and you know and then and how you work with it. The when you bear in mind means and ends, and the difference between means and ends, and the difference between process and outcome, you
Mm.
can with intention really clearly map and wrap your head around what does it mean at the latter end of maturation.
Mm.
But at the same time, I mean, as you're talking, um there is a question of, so intention is, what do you want to get or give, right? Or what you are trying to achieve in the world. What are you seeking to achieve? Intention is, what are you making significant? What is significant? And I mean, I think with the attention model of maturation, and the additional complexity, between inward and outward, and significance and insignificance, there's quite a complex patterning of typical kinds of significances
Mm.
that and yeah, that's pattern in different periods of your life, different kinds of significances. Like, what typically are the sorts of things, not like a car versus a house sorts of things, but more kind of in categories of things.
Mm.
What are the sorts of things that we make significant? And just as you're talking, kind of that light went on in my head, that's actually the use. It's not that we can't describe it with an intent framework, but we're missing something around the typical patternings of what we find significant at different
Mm.
periods of our time.
Mm.
And yeah, I just think that there's something to be looked at in exploring, yeah,
Yeah,
working with that.
but
Does
there's
it
a
make sense?
second thing to that which hasn't become apparent to me until very recently, that working with attention enables you to explore. You see, you don't need to have any further complexity or subtlety to working with the subject other than describing it as self. If you're talking intention,
Hmm.
right? Intention is about it describes how the self engages the other.
Hmm.
Now,
That's true. Hmm.
remember, we said the binary that is operative with attention isn't self and other. The binary that's opposite is operative is inward and outward.
Hmm.
So, in order to make this thing work, you've got because there isn't a person that's being referred to here. We're saying, in your experience, at the limit of your peripheral vision, there's a boundary. We call that your window of perception. Everything that you perceive is presented to you inside that window in front of you, and the perceiver is behind the window.
Hmm.
And if you try and feel the back of the perceiver, it's a direction. It's a very big thing. It's
Hmm.
now when you're using attention, you can explore the back, where this thing is coming from, where the looking is coming from. So and the question I asked you before, if you considered self and other as the binary,
Mm.
so what would be some of the kind of antonyms that would be consistent with that, or opposites that would be consistent with that distinction? Um, I mean, for the first one that occurs to me is one and many.
Small and big.
Small and big.
Perceiver and perceived.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, because one of the things that the attention thing facilitates is an escaping the whole idea of personhood.
Well, you see
You know,
that.
my
So, but
person.
yeah, yeah. That's exactly it. If you're speaking about the distinction between self and other, you are confronted by the basic sort of almost magnitude issue.
Hmm.
The self is one, the other is many. Hmm. There's also a crispness to the self. The self is, it is I. It is. I have an identity, myself. I have the name. I have this carry this biography. It is me. And it creates the condition where there's a fundamental sort of narrative or sense rather of vulnerability. The one is being confronted by the many. The small is being confronted by the big. Now, you spoke about the perceiver and the perceived. That's another way of framing it as the seer and the seen.
Hmm.
What is still possible to articulate in the language of intent is not just the distinction between this sort of self and the other, but also the seer and the seen.
Hmm.
You have the same fundamental size problem, magnitude problem. The seen is
Hmm.
still bigger than the seer. Hmm. But what's the difference in feel of the word seer and self?
As I say, seer doesn't doesn't carry so much baggage of personhood, I feel.
Mm, that's absolutely right.
You know?
That's absolutely correct. It's less distinct. It's more diffuse.
Hmm.
And the seer is the one who perceives the totality of the other. As soon as you put the self, the other that gets referred to almost by implication is other human beings, other people.
Hmm.
The seer looks past other people and looks at the world, existence.
Hmm.
It's a bigger thing. And also the seer is more diffuse. And I think that what helps a person, our whole understanding of transactional correctness, of the intent to give, cultivates the condition that people are learned to give unconditionally. That means to say their requirements of other people get less and less defined, less and less conditional. It means that the hold that other has over self gets softer. And as that hold gets softer, my own boundaries melt a little. I become less distinct. I become more of a seer than a self. And it's my intent to give that allows that move back further back from the window of perception. Because the
Hmm.
self is basically appears in the world. It's my person steps into the how am I seen? I'm stepping into the window of perception. I'm trying to be seen. Whereas the seer doesn't is like a little bit back from the window of perception. It's kind of like, you know. Now using the same logic, what's the difference between the inward and the outward?
Hmm. Um, It's the difference between the seer and the seen.
Not entirely.
Yeah, I was also thinking not entirely actually, because you can observe yourself in a certain way, actually.
That's exactly right.
Right? Mm. It's the difference between sure, I don't know, help me.
So I think the seer still has a locality, you know. The inward isn't a place, it's not a locality. The inward
Mm.
is a direction. The distinction between inward and outward is a distinction in direction.
Mm.
And if you're considering that, just like the direction looking forward seems fathomless, the direction feeling backward behind the window of perception is
Mm.
also fathomless. In fact, that one actually presents itself as more fathomless than what is in
Mm.
front. Now, that's very
Yeah, that's true,
significant.
actually. That's true. The inward is aware in relation to the seer, and the outward is aware in relation to the seer.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So the deeper you operate from within yourself, the less of a self you are and the less of a seer you are. But you're still operating through those two, almost like a marionette. I mean, it's like a puppet. It's the
Mm.
face that's being presented. That doesn't suggest it's inauthentic, but it's still a face that's being presented.
Mm.
It's now there are very significant implications to this. A self is vulnerable. A self can suffer. A self is assailable. A self can be compromised. A seer is less vulnerable, but is still vulnerable. A seer can be assailed. A seer can be compromised. A direction, how the hell do you compromise a direction? How do you how do you propose to make a direction suffer? How do you make it? How do you assail a direction? A direction
Mm.
which has at the other end of the vector something which has no end, is fathomless. So this exploring how attention operates and where attention operates from gives you a far more subtle and interesting set of tools to navigate this journey from the self transmuting into seer, from the seer transmuting into the inward.
And I think the thing, and you say turning inward is about gaining depth, right?
Mm,
It's and that's that what is that depth? Like that is the thing actually.
mm.
Because that is, I mean, what is that thing? What do you mean depth? Because I don't obviously jump in through my eyes and
No,
fall.
no,
It's not
no.
like I can't, and
There's
it's
not a
the
little Assad
difference.
that's falling into this
Yeah,
fathomless space. In fact, to experience
exactly.
the fathomless space, you have to disidentify with Assad. But
Mm.
but but the key point here,
But it's a
Assad, is
feeling,
that
though.
yeah, it's a feeling. But all three are simultaneously true. It's not like I mean, these are the realities that are already there. The self is there because you have a name, you have been socialized, you do appear as a person among people as it stands. Yeah. So that is a fact like an ox. It exists. The seer is already there. There is a part of you that engages and that experiences the totality of the other. The inward is
Mm.
already there. In fact, if the inward wasn't there, there couldn't be a seer. If the seer wasn't there, there couldn't be a self.
Mm.
So the point is not that you sort of become something else. The point is that
Mm.
you shift where you're operating from within your own being, and you disidentify with a more shallow exterior parts of your
Mm.
being, you know. And we said before that your form, we said we looked at, how does a child gain form? You're looking at the attention model. Your form is an incrustation at the limit of your peripheral vision.
Mm.
That you ever say, how do I know that I exist for you? Well, I can see bits of me that you can see. I can see my hand, I can see, So there's, at the limit of my peripheral vision, there's something that presents itself that actually is a very peculiar place, because it's the interspace between the inward and the outward.
Mm.
That place, that interspace, is a learned place. You've had 3 children now. You'll notice this with every one of your kids. This is a very difficult gaining mastery over the interface between myself, my form is a real skill that takes infants quite a while to master, you know. So the self is a learned phenomenon. It's a learned experience. But what's always existed is the watcher at the depth. This direction that all this seeing is coming from. That's always existed. That was there before endless time, and it'll be there after endless time. These other things are incrustations and learnt phenomena.
I mean, but I mean, it's metaphorical when you're describing it to say you get depth, you sink back, you know? And I mean, really, the work with attention is helping people to experience what you're pointing to with a metaphor, you know? And, and I mean, I could keep probing you on this to help, so that what does it feel like? Help me see it,
Well, the thing
Um,
is, I mean, I would challenge you with this framing that it's metaphorical. I actually don't think it's metaphorical. It's perfectly phenomenologically experiential. But the thing is that we're very visual, so we want to see something that exists.
mm,
And the problem is that you're looking. This is a little bit like the eyeball trying to see itself. I mean, you can't. It's like it is what's this end of the seeing, not what's that end of the seeing. The best way to explore this end of the seeing is to change the framing uh, of this sort of experiential modality to one of feeling.
mm, that's true, yeah.
I mean, you meditate, you pray,
Mm,
you do dhikr. When you're in a deep state of quietude, just if you just allow your attention to get a sense of what it feels like behind here, where your attention is coming, you will get a feeling of spaciousness.
mm. You
That's a
do.
phenomenologically true thing. This is not.
Mhm.
This is not
You do, and
an
you
invent.
almost
It's
have like
not.
a feeling of you do have a feeling of sinking back, like
That's right.
but it's
That's
a
right.
feeling,
It's a
so and
feeling.
but
Yeah.
you can't articulate it visually because the space you're occupying is not space in the same sense that the outward is space,
Exactly right. Exactly right. It's pre-dimensional in a sense.
Mm.
So although it's perfectly real and perfectly experiential, it's not metaphorical. The access to it is immediate and it's experiential.
Mm.
It's as
It's
experiential as
real.
what your hand's feeling on the. It's just
Mhm.
what the task is actually, I think, is to convince people of the veracity of that experience,
Mm.
because it's experience without content. People think, well, that's just nonsense. I mean, he's speaking in
That's
metaphors here.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, yeah, that's the issue, the challenge of articulate. That's why I say metaphorical, because it's an experience without content. The only way to know it, I suppose, is to feel it.
that's exactly right.
Yeah,
So,
because
so
that's well said. It's an experience without content. Yeah.
now I think exploring the issue of attention gives us a far more useful set of tools to assist people to navigate into this realm.
I mean, I do have some, it's just some comments. And it was, I mean, as you were speaking earlier, I wanted to say, but then I thought I'd just let you kind of, there are kind of two, part of this problem of maturation is a moral problem, and that's what you speak to with intention, right? The problem of intent is that it actually pulls out the morality of, and the moral problem that sits underneath being human. But there is a danger in morality, it's like it turns us all into good people, which are then insufferable
If
tyrants of
if I was
goodness.
on the other side of the screen now, I would kiss you on both cheeks and rub
Yeah.
your hair. I'm so glad you see that.
And I mean, I think what the attention facilitates is, it's like it's just escaping morality and escaping, because morality comes with guilt,
Yeah.
morality comes with obligation and burden, you know.
Absolutely right.
Mm,
Absolutely right. And the thing is that nobody's saying that you have license to behave immorally,
mm,
because that's what people are going to assume. Yeah, you see, these people, they just want to go and do kind of
mm.
erotic stuff and they
Like
just want to
Osho.
smoke, yeah, or like Osho here.
Yeah.
That's not what we're saying. As the
Mm,
absolutely, you as insofar as you do appear in the world, insofar as that you're not dead yet. You still are a self walking and breathing and being
mm.
palpable by others. There's a rule to that engagement. The rules don't stop. You do not misbehave. You're a person among people.
But I would just like to say, though, that the other thing, it's like it's the flip side, like the tyranny of morality, but mindfulness, I mean, because I mean the attention work is akin to mindfulness, but I can also gag on some mindfulness stuff, because
Yeah.
we can't lose sight of the fact that being human is still a moral problem. And like the Osho of the world, you know, you need, like, so, like the attention model and the intention model, that you can't, they two framings of the problem that are
Mhm.
mutually supporting, and
Yeah,
you
they're not
can't
mutually
leave,
exclusive.
because
Yeah.
otherwise you can go towards an Osho where it's just
Mm,
mindfulness and explore myself, but anything goes and everything's free.
mm,
And which, I mean, but the attention model says no, not everything goes and everything's
mm,
not free.
mm,
There is a sense of fundamental appropriacy that
mm,
governs each moment that we're alive,
mm,
right?
mm.
So yeah, it's like we
I
might,
mean,
yeah,
it is
we can't
interesting that
lose sight.
Islamically, monasticism is forbidden.
Mm,
So it's assessed. So the point is that you could commit to a mindful life and not necessarily be licentious like you're
mm,
describing with the Osho phenomenon. I mean, you can have a mindful life, but that's completely recluse. That sort of
mm,
says, I want that I disavow my social face. I sit in
mm,
a cave and I eat two beans a day and photosynthesize for the rest of my life. I mean,
mm,
I'm sure as a human being, fundamentally, that has to be your democratic right to do that, you know. But it's not the human path in general. I mean, the middle way, the human path, has to has to account for both of the problems, our outwardness
mm,
and our inwardness.
mm,
And we need to be able to work with both. And until we die, we are still outward. There's still a part of us
mm,
that engages the world. And you're absolutely right. This is not an either or; it's an and. You still
mm,
remain having to be a good person. The problem is that having a good person doesn't entirely float your boat, and it actually becomes quite saccharine and nauseating towards the latter end of your development because you want more.
mm.
Not so it's like you need this and something else, not this or something
Mm.
else.
No, absolutely. Um, I mean, I just think something to, that I'm thinking through as you've been talking is, I mean, so we're really saying that it's about exploring what it means to gain depth,
mm,
for that to become, that needs to be explored because it's a subtle thing. You need to, it's like your ability to even wrap your head around it will only come from trying to sit in the thing, and for the experience, because it's
mm,
formless, it's
mm,
contentless,
mm,
to actually kind of, it's like if you have rough fingers and you rub your rough fingers over a slightly rough surface, it'll feel smooth, you know?
mm, mm,
So you need to develop, you need to kind of develop that fineness of the fingers
mm,
almost, that you can feel
That's
the
right.
bumps. You wouldn't feel
That's
the
right.
bumps
That's
otherwise if you
right.
have that
That's right.
numbness in your
That's right.
experience inwardly, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely.
But I mean, so then there's a question that we have now the attention model, right? And it tracks different sorts of things that we find significant.
Mm.
You know, how does that tracking of different sorts of things that is significant, like to an adolescent, to how does that facilitate a kind of exploration of the feeling on the inside of the depth? And so it's like how does this function as a tool? I'm asking in my mind to facilitate an exploration of the inward.
Well, I dare say these exploring the distinction between the self, the seer, and the inward. That that is going to add to the sort of the usefulness of the eight stations model, I think, because first of all, it becomes then apparent how the self arises, and that the self arises by a struggle to gain competency in the world. You know, like a wanting to get stuff out of life. And also then helps us to understand at once you've gained competency, the struggle that you have with the dissolution of your form, because that is actually what happens when you age. You know,
Mm.
your lines aren't as crisp. If you looked at me at profile now, I'm not as sleek and slender as I was in my youth. In fact, quite the contrary. You become more and more of a blob. Not only do you become more and more of a blob, your world becomes more and more of a blob. If I take my glasses off now, I very often, when I wake up, I am looking into soup. I mean, I don't see things anymore that I used to see. So
Mm.
your things get, and it's like you becoming a seer almost by the natural course of events, and you're
Mm.
also beginning to realize, man, sometimes it's actually nice not to have people around. I mean, they're just annoying. They kind of bubble and fart, and they just get. I mean, there's just go away. Leave me alone. We have that experience. We have that experience as we go into our midlife crisis. We sort of like a desire to step back from, you know,
Mm.
and then now, what this understanding of what you're stepping into, this direction, that and really helps to understand. You remember when we said this sort of what is it? The seventh station, the station of the inward. It gives
Mm.
us a, a, a real language to be able to explore both the affirmation that it implies and the negation that it implies. The affirmation that it implies is inhabiting spaciousness. The negation that it implies a complete disavowal of an interest in how I appear, in my form, in my selfhood. You know, so you can. So I think that with these added sort of tools, it really strengthens a curiosity about the process. Because I have had, I mean, this is one of the problems, but it's actually the problem with both the maturation models. I have had quite a few times. I've had people say to me at the end of a very passionate delivery of the content, saying, "Well, so what? I mean, if this is all bound to happen to me, what the hell do you expect me to do about
Mm.
it?" You know, and well, I don't think that's entirely appropriate. I mean, understanding what's happening to you You can't stop the process, but you can resist it, which is what we do.
Mm.
I mean, otherwise you wouldn't get people doing Botox and having
Mm.
cosmetic surgery and kind of having their eyebrows lifted all the way up to their hairline. Why would people do that? It's the most bizarre thing. It's because they literally are trying to get that which is no longer firm and defined back to being firm and defined. They want to stay appearing.
Yeah, and I just think that, with each of the stages, there's a kind of experience of what it's like to be in one's own skin at that
Mm,
stage.
mm,
And I wonder if there's ways to explore that, I mean, because, certain uses of the attention are predictable. They predictably produce a certain
mm,
experience,
mm,
like computer games, right? That's just
mm,
an example,
mm.
right? If a
Tell
computer
me
game
about it.
sucks you very
Yeah,
much,
into
and
the
just
outward.
feel what it feels like to be you after a stressful
Yeah,
computer game. It
yeah.
kind of has that effect on one.
Mm, mm,
As an example, so, and I just wonder that that's also, for people to explore, this is what it actually means for your attention to pattern this in this way.
mm,
Um, just role play it, and
mm,
what kind of feeling does that patterning of attention produce?
mm, mm,
But I think that's what I mean. What you're doing with role playing is you're trying to role play for people what the patterning of attention at the latter ends of their maturation
mm,
produces. That's
mm, mm,
that's what we're trying to. I mean, you're trying to
mm.
kind of
That's
get
right.
people to
That's right.
experience it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I do think the reason why that's a legitimate thing to do is I don't think you can resist well, you can resist the process.
Mm.
You can't circumvent the process, but I do think you can kind of speed up the process.
Mm.
And if you speed up the process, it comes with less and less cost. In other words, if you deliberately start working on experiencing yourself at depth, then you still stay a person in the world, but you're no longer a person in the world under distress. Now, even if
Exactly.
you're
You
40
can
years
free
old,
yourself.
you want to be a person who's not under distress.
Exactly.
You
Yeah,
know,
but I mean, I might even push you though on the extent to which this happens naturally. I mean, I think it does happen naturally, but we can't overestimate the extent to which it's the degree to which it naturally reaches its natural conclusion in the average human life. Um, and maybe we could debate this, but I mean, I think it can go wrong, and people very frequently, especially in the modern world, people very frequently get
mm,
stuck.
more often than not, I think.
More often than not, they get
But,
stuck.
yeah, which is why the loneliness of the aged is a problem. I mean, the loneliness of the aged should be a problem because the aged should be people who are so mature that they have
Mm.
no need for other human beings.
Mm.
But in this world, the loneliness of the aged is a genuine problem. And it's an extreme problem, you know.
But I mean, also being aware of these things,
Mm,
deliberate work can cultivate a much, I mean, it can cultivate success on the path or on the
mm,
journey,
mm,
right?
mm.
But I mean, success also comes in degrees. I mean, it's like you can crack this code better or
Mm.
worse,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
right?
yeah. Almost by definition. I mean,
Mm.
at the end of the day, there is a skill component to this, but it's a skill that isn't finally entirely mastered until death. You know, it is something that you keep on refining. That's the reason why we have a life. It is. There is no. I mean, just precisely because there is no back to the inward. That means the exploration of the depth of it is fathomless, is limitless. You will never get there. You will stay journeying.
And there's so much a room to become good as a human being, and
Mm,
there's so much reward in goodness.
mm,
Um, the journey of attention is supplementary to the journey of intention.
mm,
It's a real, we easily trivialize how, the significant challenge we face when it comes to becoming unconditional with what we give, being
mm,
here to give unconditional. We trivialize how difficult it is to get it, but also how profound it is,
mm,
and how profoundly good it is, and how
mm,
profoundly actually amazing it is to progress towards that as a human being. Like
mm,
how much of a jewel you become,
mm.
and
That's
how
right.
much of a jewel your existence becomes in your own experience.
Mm, mm,
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it's, and this whole process with that sense, like, oh well, so what? You're telling me this. I think it's important that we help them spend enough time with this so that they see the so what.
mm.
That they
No,
don't
absolutely.
trivialize it, that people
Yeah,
actually wrap their heads around
yeah.
the difficulty of the work facing them, but also the immense rewards that are
Mm,
contained in this work.
mm. And also that if you start practicing, and what I mean by practicing is developing an first-hand experiential depth,
Mm,
inner depth. The degree to which that is the case, is the degree to which it then enables you to act unconditionally.
mm.
It's easy to act unconditionally. It is easy to trust when you don't fear.
Exactly.
And
That's
a
exactly.
direction cannot fear. A
Mm,
seer can fear. A self can fear. A direction doesn't know fear.
mm. Doesn't know resentment either.
Doesn't know resentment. It cannot hold a narrative.
Mm.
The others can hold a
That's the
narrative.
real value. That's the real value of the attention stuff. It's an escaping of um, fear and resentment.
Mm,
Because those are the two things that trap us in terms of
mm.
acting in the world.
Because
If
both
you
of
had no
those
fear and
require
resentment,
time. Both of those
yeah.
require time. And if you forego your time is the principal variable that you're dealing with, because they're both true.
Exactly.
I mean, you're both in time and you're in place, but you make place the fundamental thing you're dealing with. Then it's easy to forego both resentment, because that's time in the past, and fear, which is time in the future. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. No fear and
No,
no grief.
mm-hmm.
So,
I
Asad,
look forward to it, yeah.
the next iteration of this is I'm going to design something. I mean, not of the podcast, but the next iteration of
Mhm.
this matter is that I'm going to spend some time designing something, and then I'd like your eyes on it. A couple of people take a look at it and to basically help us build process. I think we should this. We won't do this thing. We don't won't do the potential effect it can have justice if we're talking less than 3 days. It's still
Mm.
residential and experiential. Mm,
No, I think so. I think so.
mm,
It can keep this thing alive for people, you know?
mm,
And we have the content to work the process. So
mm.
yeah, no, I look forward to it.
Fantastic.
Exciting
Thank you,
stuff.
Asan. All the best.
All the best.
Stay safe.